The night he found it, the rain was falling hard that night. Jack drove his old red pickup truck down a quiet mountain road. He had just finished a long shift at the factory. His eyes were tired, and all he wanted was to reach home and get some rest. The headlights cut through the mist as he turned a sharp corner. Suddenly, he slammed on the brakes. Something was in the middle of the road. It wasn't a deer or a raccoon. Jack squinted through the rain. The creature was glowing. Soft blue light pulsed from its body like a heartbeat. It was small, maybe the size of a dog, but it didn't look like anything from this world. It had large eyes, silver fur, and strange, torn wings. It was hurt. It limped slowly across the road, then collapsed. Jack's heart beat faster. He opened his door and ran through the rain. When he reached it, the creature looked up at him. It didn't growl or run. It just lay there, shivering. "What? What are you?" Jack whispered. The creature made a soft sound, almost like a whisper. It wasn't scary. It sounded like a cry. Jack hesitated for a second, then took off his jacket and gently wrapped the creature inside. He carried it to his truck and laid it on the seat next to him. Water dripped from his hair. Thunder rumbled in the distance. He looked at the creature again. It was breathing, but weakly. "Hang in there, little one," he said, turning the truck back on. "I'll take you home." Jack lived in a small wooden cabin near the edge of the woods. He didn't have many neighbors, just trees, animals, and silence. He brought the creature inside and placed it gently on a towel near the fireplace. He added wood and lit the fire. Warm light filled the room. He looked closely now. The creature had 3 toes on each foot. Its fur shimmered with light even in the dark. One of its wings was torn badly. It looked like it had fallen from somewhere high or had been attacked. Jack cleaned the wound with warm water and wrapped it with a clean cloth. The creature didn't move much, but its eyes watched him the whole time. "You're not from around here, are you?" he said softly. The creature blinked slowly. Jack sat beside it and gave it a bowl of water. It sniffed the bowl, then drank carefully. Jack smiled. For the next hour, Jack stayed awake, watching the fire and the strange visitor lying beside it. The storm outside grew louder. Wind howled through the trees. Lightning flashed. Then something strange happened. Jack's phone, lying on the table, lit up on its own. The screen turned white. Then strange symbols started appearing, symbols Jack had never seen before. They moved fast, glowing and spinning. He picked up the phone, confused. What the hell? Before he could finish, the lights in the cabin flickered. The fire cracked loudly. And outside, he heard a low hum. He stood up slowly, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain. His eyes went wide. A silver ship floated silently above the trees. No noise, no flames, just glowing lights underneath it. It didn't look like anything made by humans. Jack stepped back from the window, heart pounding. The creature near the fire made a soft, urgent sound. Jack turned. It was trying to get up. Its eyes locked with his. Then it spoke. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. "Please, help me." Jack froze. He couldn't believe it. He had just heard words, real words, from the creature. Outside, the ship started moving lower. Something was coming. Jack looked at the creature. It was scared. "You're running from them?" he asked. The creature nodded, just once. Jack's hand shook, but he grabbed his coat and opened the door. The wind hit him hard, but he didn't care. He looked up at the glowing ship in the sky. "You saved animals before, Jack," he told himself. "This one just needs more help." And without knowing it, in that small moment, a simple man had just stepped into something far, far bigger than himself. The creature is not what it seems. The storm had passed, but something much bigger was just beginning. Jack hadn't slept. Not a single minute. He sat near the fireplace, his back against the couch, watching the strange creature he had rescued. Outside, the trees still dripped with rain, but the skies were quiet now. The stars had returned, bright, cold, and endless. The creature, Lula. That's what it had called itself last night. Its voice was weak, almost like wind through leaves, but Jack was sure he had heard the word. Lula. It had spoken. Jack had never believed in aliens, magic, or anything beyond Earth. He worked with machines, lifted heavy metal, paid bills, and lived alone. But now, something impossible was sleeping in his home. Around midnight, something changed. Jack had nodded off for a second. But then, a sudden warmth spread through the room. He opened his eyes and saw Lula glowing. Her body shimmered softly. The blue light danced like water over her silver fur. Her wounds were healing. The bandages were loose, and the torn wing was slowly mending itself. Jack stared in awe. Then Lula opened her eyes. They were no longer tired or frightened. They were clear now, deep purple, filled with something Jack couldn't understand. Lula stood, slowly, shakily, but with purpose. Jack rose too. You okay? Lula looked at him and blinked once. Her mouth moved, and a small, calm voice came out. You helped me. Jack's jaw dropped. He had heard her again, more clearly this time. You're talking to me. She nodded. Yes, I learn. Fast. From you. Jack tried to speak, but no words came. It was like standing in a dream. What are you? He finally asked. Friend, Lula said. Hurt, lost, alone. You changed that. Jack could feel his heart beating fast again. Where are you from? Lula looked at the window. Not here. She limped forward and touched the table with her paw. Lights sparked under her touch. Jack's phone, which had died hours ago, lit up again. But this time, instead of strange symbols, a hologram appeared above it. Jack stepped back, shocked. A spinning planet, silver rings around it, glowing cities in the clouds, alien creatures moving through tall crystal buildings. The word Ilara appeared in the air above it. This is your home. Lula nodded. Ilara. I was taken. I escaped. Jack leaned forward. Who took you? Lula's glow dimmed slightly. Her eyes lowered. My uncle, she whispered. Jack blinked. Your uncle. She nodded again. He wants the throne. I belong to the royal house. He wants to end my family. Jack slowly sat down. Your royalty. Not me, Lula said. I am companion to royal child. Bonded. Jack didn't understand everything, but he got the idea. Lula wasn't just a pet. She was something sacred. A creature tied to power, maybe even destiny. And now, she was hiding on Earth. Suddenly, Jack remembered the ship from last night. He looked out the window. Nothing. No sound. No lights. No ship. They were looking for you, right? He asked. Yes, Lula said, but not to save. To silence. Jack stood. Then you're not safe here. Lula stepped closer to him. You are not safe. With me. Jack didn't speak for a moment. He looked at the creature, this strange, glowing being from another world. She was afraid, alone, hunted, and somehow she trusted him. He took a breath. Then we'll keep each other safe. Lula's glow brightened just a little. But far away, in the dark edge of space, someone was watching. In a giant silver room, screens lit up with images of planets. A tall alien in dark robes stood before a glowing map of the galaxy. Beside him knelt a robotic scout. Signal detected, the robot said. Planet. Earth. Creature. Alive. The alien's eyes narrowed. Send the bounty hunter. He will kill the human. Good, said the alien. Let the galaxy see what happens to thieves. Back on Earth, Jack had started making a plan. He packed a small bag with food, tools, and some clothes. If someone was after Lula, staying in one place was dangerous. "We'll head to the forest," he said. "I have a place there. Off-grid. No cameras. No people." Lula followed him closely. Her walk was stronger now. She even wagged her tail, just a little, when Jack handed her a scarf to wear. "You'll need to stay hidden," he said. "We don't want attention." "Understood," she replied softly. Just as they opened the door to leave, Jack's phone lit up again. This time, it showed his own face. A deep robotic voice spoke through the speaker. "Attention Galactic citizens. This human has stolen royal property. Reward for capture. 10 million credits." Jack's blood turned cold. "They think I stole you." "Yes," Lula said, sadness in her voice. "They do not know. You saved me." Jack looked at her. "They're coming, aren't they?" Lula nodded. "Soon." He looked toward the woods. The trees were dark, silent, but something told him they wouldn't stay that way for long. Jack tightened his backpack. "Then let's move. Before they get here." They slipped into the night, two small figures against the forest's deep shadows. Neither of them saw the red light blinking high above, in the sky, a ship already entering Earth's orbit. "Escape from Earth." Written in third person. Simple English, 1,000+ words. The forest was cold, silent, and full of secrets. Jack and Lula moved quietly under the trees. Branches snapped underfoot. The stars above blinked through gaps in the leaves. Jack's flashlight flickered, but he turned it off. Something felt wrong. "Keep close," he whispered to Lula. She nodded. Her glowing fur was now dim, almost invisible. She had learned to control her light, to hide it. They reached an old hunter's cabin deep in the woods. Jack had built it years ago, just in case he ever needed to disappear. Now that moment had come. He unlocked the door and led Lula inside. "It's not much," he said, lighting a small lamp, "but it's safe." The cabin had no electricity, no internet, just wood, tools, and a few cans of food. Lula sniffed the air, then curled up near the fireplace. Jack crouched beside her. "We'll rest here tonight. Tomorrow, we figure out how to get you home." "Danger," Lula whispered. "Danger close." Jack looked around, alert. "What do you mean?" She pointed with her paw toward the window. Jack stood and peeked outside. Nothing. Just trees and moonlight. But then, he saw it. A small black shape, floating between the trees, silent, slow, glowing faint red. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't human. "They found us," Jack said. The creature moved closer, scanning the ground. Jack grabbed Lula and pulled her to the trapdoor under the cabin. "We hide," he whispered. "Now." They climbed down into a hidden space beneath the floor. Jack covered the trapdoor just before the black shape entered through the cabin wall, phasing through it like a ghost. The bounty hunter had arrived. It stood tall, armored head to toe in smooth black metal. Red lights blinked on its chest. It made no sound, no footsteps. Its body moved like smoke. The hunter scanned the room with glowing red eyes. The scan passed over the floor, but didn't detect anything. Then it spoke in a flat, cold voice. "Target not here. Tracking continues." With a hum, the hunter floated back outside and vanished into the woods. Below the floor, Jack exhaled. They had survived, for now. Morning came slowly. Jack and Lula emerged from hiding, tired but alive. "We can't run forever," Jack said. "They have tech we can't beat." "Then we do not run," Lula said. "We rise." Jack stared at her. "What do you mean?" "There is a ship," she said, "hidden. Old escape pod. From the palace. When I fell, it followed me." Jack's eyes widened. "A ship. Near here." "Yes," she said. "Buried. In mountain. Not far." "Can it fly?" "If you fix it." Jack nodded. "Then that's our chance." They packed quickly and moved again, this time deeper into the hills. After hours of hiking, they reached a rocky cave hidden behind a waterfall. Lula stepped forward and pressed her paw against the stone. A small part of the wall slid open. Inside was the ship. It was damaged, covered in dirt and moss. Shaped like a smooth silver egg, it had strange alien markings and glowing lines. Jack walked around it, touching its surface. It was cold, but still alive. "Can you open it?" he asked. Lula nodded and tapped a small pattern on the shell. With a hiss, the door opened. Inside was a round cockpit, seats too small for humans, and panels glowing dimly. Jack stepped inside. "This is insane." "You fix. We fly," Lula said. Jack looked at the control systems. Wires were cut, energy cells broken, and one panel was smoking. "It'll take time," he muttered. "Not much," Lula said. "They follow." Jack got to work. He used his tools, rewired the power system, and patched holes using metal scraps from his backpack. Outside, birds flew off in panic. The wind changed. They were not alone. In the trees above, the bounty hunter watched, silent, waiting. He raised a small black orb and tossed it into the air. It hovered and exploded into a red beacon. Far away in space, the signal reached the Galactic nobles and the traitor uncle. "The human has the ship," the robot scout announced. The uncle smiled darkly. "Then he has signed his death." Jack wiped sweat from his face. "Almost done," he said. "Just one more wire." He bent down and heard a sound. Crack. Leaves moved outside. "They're here," Lula whispered. Jack grabbed his wrench. "Go inside the ship. Stay low." "I stay with you." "No. If I fail, you still have to get out." But before she could argue, the bounty hunter entered the cave. He floated above the ground, eyes glowing red. "Step away," the hunter said. "You are not authorized to touch royal property." Jack stood firm. "She's not property. She's a living being. And you're not taking her. You are a threat. You will be eliminated." The hunter raised his arm, ready to fire. But Jack was faster. He grabbed a metal rod and smashed it into a control panel, sending a burst of light across the cave. The ship lit up fully. "Lula, now." She jumped inside, and Jack followed as the door closed. The ship powered up. The bounty hunter blasted the ship, but the shield held. Inside, Jack gripped the controls. "Do you know how to fly this thing?" he asked. "No," Lula replied. "But you do." The ship scanned Jack's hands and eyes. Then the controls changed into English. "Pilot, Jack Rayner. Status, approved." Jack blinked. "Well, okay then." The engines roared to life. The cave shook. The bounty hunter raised a rocket launcher. Jack shouted, "Hold on." The ship blasted upward, breaking through rock, soil, and forest. They shot into the sky like a comet. The bounty hunter's rocket missed by inches, and just like that, they were in space. Jack stared out the window. Earth grew smaller behind them. "We made it," he whispered. But Lula looked ahead. "Not yet. This is only the beginning." Trial by fire. The stars moved like slow fire above them. Jack sat in the pilot's seat, hands tight on the glowing control bars. The escape ship flew quietly through deep space, leaving behind Earth and everything he had ever known. Next to him, Lula watched in silence. Her fur shimmered softly again, the way it had when Jack first found her. She looked calm, but her eyes were heavy with worry. Jack checked the ship's screen. It showed a red warning symbol. "We need fuel," he said. "Fast." Lula nodded. "There is a moon. Not far. It has what we need. But it is dangerous." Jack looked at her. "How dangerous?" Lula didn't answer. She didn't have to. The ship dropped out of hyperspeed and entered the orbit of a dark red moon. The surface was cracked, smoky, and glowing like hot coal. Lava rivers flowed between black mountains. Giant metal trees grew from the ground, dead machines from a long-forgotten war. The ship shook as they flew lower. "What happened here?" Jack asked. "Battle world," Lula said. "Long ago. Now, a place of tests." Jack frowned. "Tests. For warriors. Only the brave survive here." "Great," Jack muttered. "Sounds cozy." The ship landed on a flat metal platform near a glowing fuel crystal. Jack grabbed a tool from the back. "I'll get the power core. Stay inside." But Lula jumped down beside him. "You may need me." Jack didn't argue. Together, they stepped onto the strange surface of the moon. The heat was intense, but Lula's glow seemed to protect them. Jack moved carefully toward the glowing crystal, using the tool to unlock the energy. Suddenly, the ground shook. A loud roar echoed from the mountains. Jack spun around. What was that? "Trial begins," Lula said. "We are not alone." From the shadows, 3 large creatures crawled out. Giant, reptile-like beasts with 6 legs, red skin, and armor made of stone. Their eyes glowed yellow, locked on Jack and Lula. Jack raised the tool. "Any ideas?" "Run," Lula said. They sprinted toward the ship. The beasts followed, fast and wild. One leaped over them, blocking the path. Jack slid under it and pulled Lula with him. "Get in the ship," he yelled. But before they could reach it, the ground split open. Jack fell into a dark hole, landing hard in a tunnel below. "Jack!" Lula screamed from above. He tried to climb, but the walls were smooth and high. "I'm okay," he shouted. "Stay hidden." But then, the tunnel lit up. A tall figure stood at the other end. Not a beast, not a machine. A warrior. Alien armor, glowing sword, helmet shaped like a bird. He raised the sword and pointed it at Jack. "You enter Trial Moon. You pass, or die." Jack didn't want to fight, but the warrior charged. He barely dodged the glowing blade. It hit the wall behind him and sliced through solid rock. Jack picked up a broken rod and blocked the next attack. Sparks flew. They fought in the heat, light flashing around them. Jack got tired fast, but he didn't give up. He remembered every lesson life had taught him. Stay calm, stay sharp, protect the weak. The warrior struck again. Jack rolled to the side and hit back, hard. His rod knocked the sword from the warrior's hand. The warrior stepped back and laughed, then removed his helmet. He was old, with golden eyes and scars on his face. "You fight not with skill," he said, "but with heart." Jack stood straight, panting. "What is this place?" "The Moon of Fire," the warrior said. "Those who protect the royal companion must pass the trial." You passed. The tunnel rumbled again, and a platform rose from the ground. Jack climbed on it and was lifted back to the surface. Lula ran to him, eyes wide. "You are alive." "Barely," Jack smiled. She looked at him for a long time, then said softly, "You are more than protector. You are chosen." Jack frowned. "What does that mean?" Before she could answer, a bright light flashed in the sky. Another ship was coming. Not just any ship. A royal ship. Huge, gold, and shaped like a bird. "The council," Lula whispered. "They know we're here." Jack and Lula were taken aboard by the royal guards. They weren't treated like prisoners, but they weren't free either. Inside, the ship was filled with glowing walls, soft music, and strange smells. Lula walked proudly. She belonged here. Jack, however, felt like a stranger. They entered a grand room where glowing beings sat on high seats, alien nobles with eyes like stars and clothes made of light. One spoke. "You are Jack Rayner, human from Earth." Jack nodded. "Yeah, I guess I'm famous now." Another noble looked down. "You stand accused of stealing royal property." Jack stepped forward. "I didn't steal anyone. I found Lula injured. I helped her. She spoke to me. Trusted me." The nobles murmured. Lula floated forward. "He saved me," she said. "He is not a thief. He is my protector." A long silence followed. Then the oldest noble stood. "Let the ancient rite be done." Jack looked confused. "Right." Lula turned to him. "It means a trial of truth. In front of all the galaxy." Far away, deep in a dark palace, Lula's uncle watched the trial from a giant screen. He clenched his fist. "This human, he ruins everything." He turned to a shadowy figure behind him. "Prepare the fleet. If the council won't destroy him, I will." Human on trial. Jack had never felt so alone. He stood at the center of a giant glowing platform, surrounded by thousands of alien eyes. The royal hall was shaped like a star, with each noble sitting on their own floating crystal chair, high above the ground. Lights danced across the walls. Strange music played in the air. The galaxy's most powerful beings watched silently, their faces unreadable. Jack could feel their judgment in every breath. This wasn't just a courtroom. It was a place where history was made. And he, a human from a small town on Earth, had somehow landed right in the middle of it. A voice echoed through the air, calm but strong. "This is the trial of Jack Rayner. Species, human. Planet, Earth." A silver-robed alien floated down from the ceiling, holding a glowing staff. "You are charged with the theft of royal property, with crossing into protected airspace, and with interfering in galactic matters without permission." Jack swallowed hard. He wanted to shout, to explain himself, but he waited. Across the room, Lula floated in a beam of soft blue light. She looked calm, but Jack knew her heart was heavy. She had begged the council to hear the truth. Now it was time. "State your defense," the silver-robed alien said. Jack stepped forward, clearing his throat. "I didn't steal anything," he began. "I was driving home on a rainy night. I saw something hurt on the road. I didn't know what it was. I just knew it needed help." The crowd murmured. "I took her home. I cleaned her wounds. I fed her. She was scared. And alone. Like me. I never knew she was part of royalty. She never told me until later. But even then, I didn't care about that. I cared about her." His voice shook a little. "You say she's royal property, but she's not a thing. She's not a trophy. She's a friend, and I would protect her again, no matter what it cost me." The council remained silent. Then one of the high nobles leaned forward. Her eyes were sharp, her voice like wind over ice. "Do you claim to love the creature you call Lula?" Jack blinked. "I don't know what love means to your people, but yes, she's my friend, my family. That's love to me." The noble leaned back. A soft light filled the room. A glowing circle formed around Jack. He looked down. His own memories started floating in the air. His cabin, the rainy night, Lula's glowing moons, their escape through the forest, their battle on the fire moon. The council saw everything. They saw his fear, his kindness, his courage. A long silence followed. Then, slowly, the oldest noble stood. His voice was deep and slow, like time itself. "We see no evil in the human's heart." Jack felt his knees go weak. "He is not a thief. He is a protector." The nobles nodded one by one, until all lights turned white. "Jack Rayner of Earth," the old noble said, "we name you guardian of the royal companion. Your name shall be remembered in the stars." Jack stared at them, stunned. I don't know what to say." "You already said enough," the noble smiled. But before the celebration could begin, the floor shook. Alarms blared. The sky above the council chamber turned red. A deep, broken voice roared through every speaker. "This trial is a lie. The council is weak, and the human must fall." A massive ship crashed through the upper dome, sending glass and stars raining down. Jack grabbed Lula and shielded her. Guards screamed. Nobles ran. Floating above them, in a black and gold warship, stood Lula's uncle, face hidden behind a golden mask, eyes burning with rage. "You let a human into our halls," he spat. "You poison our bloodline with weakness." Jack stood tall. "And you call yourself noble, attacking your own people." "I bring strength," the uncle said. "You bring shame." He raised a strange weapon, one that glowed with dark energy. "Step forward, human. Let's end this now." The royal guards rushed to protect the council. Ships scrambled in the sky above. But Jack knew this fight was not about armies. It was personal. Jack looked at Lula. "I have to stop him." "You are not ready," she said, fear in her voice. "Maybe not," Jack whispered, "but I'm not letting him hurt anyone else." Jack jumped onto a royal speeder and blasted off toward the uncle's warship. Explosions rocked the sky. Ships chased him. One of them fired, barely missing. Inside the warship, the uncle watched him approach. "Foolish creature," he said. "You think you matter." Jack landed hard on the outer deck of the ship. He climbed inside, fighting off guards with nothing but a shield and a metal rod. His body was tired, but his spirit was stronger than ever. He finally reached the throne room. Giant, dark, empty, except for one man. The uncle stood waiting, sword in hand. "You will die here, human," he said. "Maybe," Jack replied. "But not before you hear this. Lula's life matters, more than your pride, more than your throne." They clashed. Swords against rods. Light against darkness. Jack dodged, ducked, countered. Every strike was heavier than the last. He used everything he had learned: survival, pain, instinct. He fought not for power, but for someone he cared about. Finally, with a burst of strength, Jack disarmed the uncle. His weapon fell to the floor. Jack held the metal rod to the uncle's chest. "End it," the uncle hissed. "Prove you're like me." But Jack stepped back. "No, that's the difference. I protect, you destroy." The council guards arrived moments later and arrested the uncle. Back at the royal court, Jack stood beside Lula once more. This time, not as a criminal, but as a hero. Rise of the human hero. The royal city was on fire. Just hours ago, Jack had stood before the Galactic Council as a protector. Now he stood on a battlefield, smoke in the sky, alarms screaming, ships crashing like falling stars. "They're everywhere," a guard shouted, running past him. Jack helped a young alien child to safety, then turned toward the palace tower. Lula was inside. "This isn't a war," Jack muttered to himself. "This is a trap." After the trial, Lula had warned him. She had felt it. Something bigger coming. Her uncle's attack was just the beginning. "There is something darker," she had whispered. Something even he feared. Now Jack understood. Whoever, or whatever, was behind this invasion wasn't after the throne. They were after him. Inside the palace, Lula stood before a massive glowing mirror, a galactic artifact only the royals could use. Her paws trembled. A face appeared in the glass. Not her uncle. A shadow. Its shape changed constantly. Its eyes were silver and endless. "You bonded with the human," it whispered. "You broke the old law." "He saved me," Lula said. "I chose him." "Then he must pay," the shadow replied. "Who are you?" "I am the past and the future. I am what your kind buried long ago." Then the mirror shattered. Jack reached the tower just in time to catch Lula as she stumbled back. "What happened?" he asked. "The Void King," she said, voice shaking. "He's real." "Who is he?" "Ancient enemy, banished before memory, now returned. And he's calling your name." Jack's heart dropped. "Me? Why?" "Because you're not just a protector anymore," Lula said. "You're a symbol. And symbols start movements." The royal city tried to defend itself. Ships rose into the sky. Turrets fired blasts of light. Citizens ran or fought with all they had. But it wasn't enough. Dark ships, black as shadows, descended like falling knives. They moved in silence, slicing through the defenses. Jack ran through the streets, helping whoever he could, lifting rubble, saving the injured, shouting directions. "You!" a voice cried from above. A group of alien warriors stood on a rooftop, holding a flag with Jack's face on it. "You are the human, the guardian. We will follow you." Jack stared up, stunned. "What?" he shouted. "Give us orders." Jack didn't know what to say. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a king. But then he remembered the trial. The fire moon. The first time he lifted Lula into his arms. Every step had led here. He stood tall. "Form a line across the market square. Protect the escape ships." The warriors obeyed. Others joined. A group of Galactic engineers turned their transport ship into a shield. Citizens followed his voice. In a single hour, Jack became more than a human. He became hope. But far above, the Void King watched from his throne ship. His body was made of shadows and ancient metal. His voice could break stars. And in his hand, he held a map of the galaxy, with Jack's face marked in red. "He is the center," the Void King said. "Break him, and the galaxy falls." On the ground, Jack reached the main power core of the city. The defenses were failing. They needed more energy. Lula ran beside him, panting. "We can overload the core," she said. "Turn it into a pulse shield. Protect the city." "What happens to us if we do that?" Jack asked. "We don't survive," Lula said quietly. Jack looked at her. He thought of Earth, his cabin, the rainy road. He also thought of her. He smiled. "Then we survive anyway." They reached the core. Jack connected the wires. Lula pressed her paw against the glowing crystal. The power grew. The light rose. The pulse built like a beating heart. Outside, the Void King's ships closed in. One more minute, and the city would fall. Jack shouted, "Now!" A massive wave of light exploded from the palace, burning the sky with white energy. The ships shattered. The shadows screamed. The pulse swept across the ground like a second sun. And then, silence. Hours passed. Jack woke up lying in a soft bed. Alien medics stood around him, whispering. He looked up. "Lula." She limped toward him. "Alive." "You did it," she said. "No," Jack smiled. "We did." Outside, crowds were gathering. Alien families holding banners, chanting Jack's name in hundreds of languages. They had survived. Because of a human. Because of him. The council returned days later. The city was rebuilding. Nobles had come to offer their thanks. But they came with a question too. A new offer. "Jack Rayner of Earth," the High Noble said, "you are no longer a visitor. You are a guardian, a leader, and a hero of the stars. Will you accept a seat among the Galactic Circle?" Jack didn't answer right away. He looked at Lula, then at the stars above. He never asked to be a hero. Third person asterisk simple English asterisk tilde 1100 plus words. The stars moved slower now. After weeks of war, fire, light, and darkness, Jack sat quietly in a small seat, inside a royal cruiser, heading toward a blue and green planet he hadn't seen in a long time. Earth. His home. Trees. Rain. Silence. Pancakes. His old truck. His cabin near the woods. That was all he wanted. He hadn't said yes to the council's offer yet. He didn't care about thrones or titles. He didn't dream of sitting beside glowing aliens in golden rooms. He had never asked to be a hero. Lula sat beside him, her fur calm, her wings folded. She had changed too. Stronger now. Wiser, and still full of light. "Are you nervous?" she asked softly. Jack gave a half smile. "Not sure. Maybe." "You saved a galaxy," she said. "But you miss your trees." Jack laughed. Yeah. Is that weird? No, Lula said. It's human. They landed just before dawn, deep in the forest behind Jack's cabin. No one saw them. No cameras. No news. Just birds, fog, and the sound of wind in the leaves. Jack stepped onto the soil, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. Home, he whispered. But something felt different. The cabin door was open, not broken, just unlocked. Jack stepped inside slowly. Everything was where he left it. But someone had been here. On the table sat a photo of Jack, with Lula. Someone had printed it from an alien news source. Next to it, a note. You are not forgotten. Earth remembers. Come when you're ready. United Galactic Embassy, New York branch. Jack stared at the words. They found out, he said. Of course, Lula replied. You lit up the sky. He picked up the photo and smiled. It's strange. This place was always quiet. Now, even the stars know about it. And about you. Jack spent the next few days repairing the cabin. He fixed the roof, cut wood, made food, watched rain fall from the porch. Lula rested nearby, her body glowing softly at night like a lantern. They said little, but the silence was peaceful, not empty. Jack needed time to feel human again. But the truth was, he wasn't the same. One evening, while watching the stars, Jack saw a ship rise over the horizon. Small, smooth, fast. It landed gently in the field behind his cabin. A girl stepped out. Human. Maybe 25. Wearing black clothes with a silver badge. She waved. Jack Raynor. That's me. I'm Lena, she said, from the Earth Galactic Relations team. Jack raised an eyebrow. You guys move fast. We've been following your story for weeks, she said. The footage of your trial. It's the most viewed thing on the planet. Jack chuckled. Never thought I'd go viral for adopting an alien. Lana smiled, then grew serious. The galaxy wants you to join them. But Earth wants something else. Jack waited. They want you to represent us, Lana said. As our first ambassador, to show we're not just watching. We're part of it now. Jack looked at Lula, then back at the stars, then down at his porch steps. Can I still live here? He asked. Lana grinned. You can live wherever you want. You're Jack Raynor. That night, Jack sat with Lula near the fire. I never planned any of this, he said. I was just a guy with a toolbox and an old truck. But you cared, Lula said. And that changed everything. He looked at her. What about you? What now? I will return to Ilara. Help rebuild. Tell our children stories about the human who lit up the sky. Jack smiled. Make me sound cooler than I was. Too late, she said. They already worship you. In the morning, Jack made a choice. He accepted the role, not of a ruler, not of a king, but of a bridge. Between earth and stars. Between fear and hope, between silence and voice. He didn't wear a crown. He wore boots, gens, and a worn-out jacket. But when he spoke, galaxies listened. Months later, on a large platform floating above Earth, the first Earth Galactic Peace Hub opened. Thousands gathered, aliens and humans side by side. Jack stood in the center, with Lula beside him. I was just a man, he said. Until I met a creature who needed help. That's all it takes. One act of kindness. One choice to protect instead of hurt. He looked across the sea of faces. We're not enemies. We're not different. We all bleed. We all fear. We all hope. The crowd went silent. Then burst into thunderous applause. And back in his cabin, Jack still lived a quiet life. He still chopped wood. He still cooked too many eggs. He still sat on the porch with coffee and a blanket. But now, sometimes, he'd hear a soft hum in the sky, a ship flying low, a child waving from a window, a message from the stars. Thank you. He never asked to be a hero. He never wanted to be known. But sometimes, the galaxy decides. And when it did, it chose the human with muddy boots and a heart full of fire.